Number 7 on this list was sold loose, weighed out into a little paper bag, and it was very often the first thing a British child ever bought with money of their very own. Number 3 told you, days in advance, exactly what was going to be on top of the pops that week. And number 1 was so famous, so completely woven into what this shop meant, that its name became the name everybody used for the whole store. 9 things. 9 counters in one shop, and if you grew up in Britain in the 1960s, your mother took you round every single one of them on a Saturday morning. This is Woolworths, in 1968, the shop that had something for everybody, and we're going back through its doors, one counter at a time. Subscribe now, so you don't miss the next video, because we're only just getting started on the Britain worth remembering. Number 1. The Pick and Mix. Just inside the doors, the long, low counter of open trays, hundreds of sweets under the light, and beside it, the little square paper bags and a small metal scoop. Frank Woolworth had opened his first British store in Liverpool in 1909, and the weighed-out sweets were there from the very beginning, the Everton mints supplied by Barker and Dobson just up the road. By the 1960s, the trays held a new world of color. Fizzy cola bottles and foil-wrapped toffees and chocolate buttons, and things that had not existed a decade before. What everyone remembers is the freedom of it. You filled the bag yourself. Nobody chose for you. For a child, that was a kind of power, granted nowhere else in the whole of life, and the agony of choosing between the pear drops and the flying saucers was the sweetest agony a Saturday held. The lady weighed the bag on the scale and told you the price, and you handed over your own few pennies, and it was yours. The next counter smelled of sugar too, but it was there because nothing was ever wasted. Number 2. The broken biscuits. Beside the sweets stood the biscuit counter, the big square tins on a slope with glass lids, each one full of a different biscuit, and at the end, cheapest of all, the tin marked broken biscuits. When the biscuits arrived and some had cracked or crumbled in the tin, Woolworths did not throw them away. They sold them off by weight for a fraction of the price. A glorious jumbled mixture of every kind all together. What everyone remembers is that this was the bargain your grandmother knew about, the thrifty secret of the wise shopper. A big bag of perfectly good biscuits for next to nothing because a few corners were chipped. You never knew quite what you were getting. A custard cream here, a bit of a bourbon there, a chunk of something pink and coconut. It was the taste of a country that had come through rationing and had not forgotten the value of things, where a broken biscuit was still a biscuit and still a treat. The next counter is where the teenagers gathered, and it played the sound of the future. Number 3. The record counter. Towards the back of the store, the racks of vinyl, the 7-inch singles in their paper sleeves, and the long-playing albums behind them, and on the wall, the thing every teenager came to see, the singles chart, the printed list of the top hits of the week. What almost nobody remembers now is that this was how you knew what was coming. You studied that chart on the wall to see what would be on top of the pops on Thursday, which record had climbed and which had fallen. Woolworths sold the hits cheaper than the specialist shops, and for a great many British teenagers, the very first record they ever owned, bought with saved-up pocket money, came from that counter. You took it home and played it until the family complained, and you were part of something, part of a whole generation buying the same song in the same week. This was 1968, the year of 100 songs you can still hum. The next counter had the shop's own secret name on everything it sold. Number 4. The Winfield counter. In 1963, Woolworths had launched its own brand, its own label, put on goods across the whole store, and they called it Winfield, after Frank Winfield Woolworth himself. And the wonderful thing about Winfield was that it went on absolutely everything. What almost nobody outside Britain would believe is the sheer range of it. Winfield washing up liquid, Winfield paint, Winfield biscuits, Winfield batteries, Winfield fishing tackle, Winfield perfume, even, later on, Winfield lager and blank cassette tapes. It was often said you could walk out of Woolworths with a tin of white emulsion and a pair of stockings and a bag of sweets, all under the same one name. It was never quite as good as the branded thing beside it, and everybody knew it, but it was cheaper, and for a household counting every penny, it was exactly good enough. Winfield was the sensible choice, the own label before the supermarkets had one, the little blue and white promise of a fair price. The next counter dressed the children of the nation. Number 5, the children's clothes. On the clothing counters were the little garments that dressed a generation of British children, the vests and the knickers and the cardigans and the school socks. Here is what almost nobody knows. Many of those clothes were made by a family called Passold in a factory at Langley, and Passold made a range they called Ladybird, but Woolworths, in those days, insisted on selling them with no brand name at all, plain and unlabeled, to keep the price down. The famous Ladybird name that parents would later know so well was not on the label in 1968. The clothes simply were what they were, sturdy, double-stitched, made to survive one child and be handed down to the next. What every mother remembers is that these were the clothes you could actually afford. Good, honest garments that lasted, bought a size too big, so there was growing room. The school jumper that saw 2 children through before it was finally worn out. Before we go on, I want to ask you something. One of these counters is not really a counter in your memory. It is your mother, holding a cardigan up against you to check the size. Tell me in the comments which counter just brought her back. I read every single one. The next counter was where a young girl first felt grown up. Number 6, the cosmetics counter. Near the front of the store, by the sweets, stood the toiletries and cosmetics, and this was where a British teenage girl in 1968 first stepped, shyly, into the world of grown-up things. What made it possible was a clever idea: small sizes. Woolworths sold everything in miniature, half-length lipsticks and tiny bottles of scent and little bars of scented soap, priced at a few pennies, so that a girl with almost no money could still experiment, still try a color, still feel transformed. There was a range called Baby Doll that hit exactly the spot with teenagers. Its bright packaging, a little piece of the swinging 60s in an ordinary high street shop. What everyone remembers is the daring of it. The first lipstick chosen and bought and hidden in a coat pocket. The first grown-up smell dabbed behind the ears. Woolworths let you become someone new for the price of a comic. The next counter was where you spent your birthday money. Number 7, the toy counter. The toys were spread along the counter and in the aisles, and they were not the grand expensive things from the catalog, but the small, affordable joys a child could buy with birthday money or pocket money saved. The bag of plastic soldiers, the skipping rope, the bag of marbles, the jigsaw, the little die-cast car, the paper kite, the jacks and the yo-yo and the water pistol. What everyone remembers is that this was pocket money shopping, the counter where a child was a customer in their own right, weighing up whether to spend the whole shilling now or save it, learning the value of money one small toy at a time. And at Christmas, the toy counter transformed, the tinsel went up, and children pressed against it with a list in their heads. The next counter kept the whole nation's clothes in good repair. Number 8, the haberdashery. In the middle of the store, the great counter of sewing things, the reels of cotton in every color on their wooden stand, the cards of buttons, the zips and the ribbons and the elastic, and the bolts of fabric sold by the yard, measured against a brass rule set into the counter edge. What almost nobody under a certain age remembers is that in 1968, you mended things, and you made things. When a button came off, you did not throw the shirt away. You bought a card of buttons and sewed one on. Women made their own dresses and their children's clothes from fabric bought by the yard. and the haberdashery counter was where the whole enterprise of a make-do-and-mend nation was supplied. You remember your mother matching a reel of thread against a garment, holding it to the light to be sure. This was the counter of thrift and of skill, of a country that repaired what it owned. The last counter grew things and kept things alive. Number 9. The garden and pet counter. Towards the back, the loose seeds in their packets, and the flower bulbs sold from open trays, the daffodils and the tulips you scooped out and bought by the handful for the garden, the little packets of carrot and lettuce and sweet pea, and near it, very often, the pet counter, the goldfish in their tanks, the budgerigars, the collars and the bags of seed, and the bone-shaped biscuits. What everyone remembers is that a great many British families brought home their first pet from Woolworths, the goldfish won or bought and carried home in a bag of water, the budgie that sang in the corner of the front room for years. It was an ordinary shop that somehow sold everything a life was made of, from the sweets at the start to the living creature at the end. 9 counters, all under one roof. The pick and mix and the broken biscuits, the records and the Winfield, the children's clothes and the cosmetics, the toys and the haberdashery and the garden counter. It was not the grandest shop in the town. It was simply the one that had everything, the one that was always there, where a child spent their first pennies and a mother stretched the housekeeping, and a whole country was quietly supplied. Woolworths held on for 99 years, and then, in the winter of 2008, it went into administration, and by the 6th of January 2009, the last of the stores had closed. We don't just remember the shop, we remember the life we lived inside it. Which counter did you head for first? Tell me in the comments. One counter, one memory. Subscribe, because there is a great deal more of this country left to remember.